This is the most terrifying sound. There was a man hiking in the woods when all of a sudden he heard a whistling coming from behind him. At first he thought it was just some birds, so he kept walking. But then he started hearing the whistling more and more, and it seemed like it was getting closer and closer. So he turned around to see what was going on, but he didn't see anything. So he started to walk back the way that he came. But as he walked, he continued to hear the whistling, only now it seemed to be right behind him. He started to run, but the whistling got faster as well. It sounded like this. As you can imagine, he was pretty scared at this point, not knowing what was out there. Was it some kind of animal? Could it be a person? What was it? He looked behind him again, but still nothing. The man ran faster, but the whistling continued to get louder. Then all of a sudden, right as he was about to trip over a root that was sticking out of the ground, he looked behind him one final time, and that's when he saw it. There standing behind him was a little girl in a Victorian nightgown. And at first he thought she was just standing there innocently whistling a tune, just some little kid. But then he noticed something strange about her. She didn't seem to be getting any closer. As he continued to run, the whistling grew louder and louder, but it wasn't getting any closer. In fact, it was getting further away. He stopped running and turned around to face her, and that's when he saw her face. He had only seen the back of her head before, but when he saw her face, his blood ran cold. Her face was completely white, as if all the color had been drained out of it. Her eyes were wide and soulless, staring directly at him. And then he noticed something else. Her mouth wasn't moving, yet the whistling was still coming from her. The man screamed and ran as fast as he could, stumbling over roots and rocks, not caring where he was going. He just needed to get away from her. But the whistling followed him. No matter how far he went, he couldn't get away from it. The sound echoed through the trees, bouncing off the trunks and leaves, making it sound like she was right behind him. But when he looked back, he saw that she was still standing there, her face pale in the moonlight, her eyes boring into his soul. And he knew that no matter how far he ran, he couldn't escape her. Then suddenly, she started to move. She took a step forward, then another, and then she was running through the trees, her nightgown flowing behind her like a white cloud. And the man knew that he had to get away from her, that he had to put as much distance between them as possible. So he ran. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs screamed for mercy. He ran until he could barely see the pale face and soulless eyes behind him. And then finally, as he stumbled through the trees, he heard a sound that made him stop in his tracks. The whistling had stopped. So do you believe this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching. Welcome to my channel. This is Eyes Above the Firelight. I don't know who needs to know this, but staring directly into the fire can cause some truly messed up things to happen. Just ask these Reddit users. In 2019, a user posted about their encounter with some glowing eyes that they saw in the trees while camping. They were sitting around the campfire with their two friends when suddenly they saw something really creepy. The firelight was reflecting in the eyes of whatever was sitting in the trees. The scariest part was that it wasn't just one animal, but at least 3. They watched them for a few minutes before they had to leave. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. What do you think these eyes could be? I think I have a pretty good idea of what it is, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want to influence your answer. Go ahead and leave your best guess down below in the comments, and then we'll reveal the answer in just a moment. While you think about what it could be, let's move on to our next story. Deer. This next Reddit user almost ran headfirst into one of these mysterious creatures. They were walking home from a friend's house with some glow sticks they had gotten from the trunk of a car. Maybe that's how this person saw the eyes. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's read. Walking home from a friend's house at about 11 p.m. I decided to cut through the park instead of walking on the street. Big mistake. It was a fairly dark night, but there was enough light for me to see where I was going. About halfway through the park, I noticed that the light from my glow stick was reflecting off of something in the tree above me. At first I assumed it was glass or maybe a plastic bag. Then I realized that it was definitely an animal of some kind. I couldn't tell what kind since all I could see was the reflection of the glow stick. All I could think about was the Blair Witch Project and how those poor girls never made it out of the woods. Was I being stalked by some woodland creature? Is this thing going to jump down from the tree and eat me alive? I started to panic. My heart began to race and my breathing got faster. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that it was probably just a cat. But every time I looked up in the tree, it seemed like the eyes were getting closer. I started to run, practically sprinting the rest of the way home. As I turned to look back at the tree, I saw something drop from the tree and hit the ground. I didn't stop to look. I just kept running. When I finally got home, I poured myself a glass of water and collapsed onto my couch. To this day, I still wonder what those eyes were watching me. Well, I have a theory, but let's hear what you have to say. What do you think these eyes belong to? I personally am thinking we have ourselves a case of the heebie-jeebies. These Reddit users might be suffering from the classic case of seeing something that isn't actually there. You know, like when you stare at the wall and you start to see shapes and figures that are unactually there. That's what I think is happening here. But I think it might be more so because of the fact that they are rereading into this situation too much. Okay, yes, there are animals that are nocturnal, that have great eyesight. And yes, they could have been reflecting the glow sticks. But then why does the person say that the eyes are getting closer? Animals don't usually climb down trees to stalk their prey. Even if they do, they don't do it in broad daylight. I mean, this person said that it was fairly dark outside. And if it was dark enough for the glow stick to reflect, then it wouldn't have been light enough for the animal to be climbing around in the tree. If I had to guess, I would say that this person was simply looking for something to blame for their anxiety, and they found it. Like, you know how sometimes your brain will play tricks on you? I think that's what happened here. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. And don't forget to stay tuned for more terrifying tales. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everyone. After a long day of hiking, two young men decided to pitch their tent and camp out in the middle of the forest. They got everything set up and were just getting ready to go to bed when they heard some noises outside of their tent. They assumed it was just some wild animals, so they ignored it and went to sleep. About an hour later, one of the campers woke up to the sound of what sounded like footsteps near their tent. He poked his head outside and saw what he can only describe as a nightmare. Standing in front of him was a man who appeared to have no face. He didn't seem to have any eyes, nose, or mouth. The man just stood there for a moment before turning around and walking back into the darkness. The camper quickly ducked back down into the tent and shook his friend awake. Told him to come take a look outside, but by the time they both got his tent, the mysterious man was gone. They looked all around the tent, but there was no sign of the man anywhere. They couldn't see any footprints in the soft dirt either. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Of course, they were terrified sitting in that tent, not knowing what was out there, so they decided to pack up and leave. But as they were doing so, one of them noticed something strange. There was a ring of some sort of dirt around the tent. As they got closer, they realized it wasn't dirt at all. It was a ring of small pebbles. And in the center of the circle was a single, perfectly round indentation. It looked like a ring made of stones with a divot in the middle. They didn't know what to make of it, but decided to leave and go find somewhere else to camp. As they walked away, they never looked back. They didn't want to risk whatever this was coming back for them. But a few days later, these same two campers were telling their story to the police. Apparently, they had reported the incident to the local police as soon as they got cell phone service. But when the officers heard the story, they just kind of laughed and told them to come in for a hot meal and a good night of sleep. The boys said they appreciated the offer, but they didn't want to stay another night in the forest. The officers then convinced them to tell their story to the media, which is how we have this news report today. The reporter is standing in what is supposed to be the same forest where the incident took place. The officer said that they have sent out a search party to look for the supposed man with no face, but so far there has been no sign of him.
Oh.
There are some people who claim that this man with no face may be Bigfoot, but I don't really see the connection here. Sure, Bigfoot is a large, hairy humanoid creature that supposedly roams around the forests of North America. But the descriptions of Bigfoot usually include things like huge feet and maybe some really long arms. No one has ever described Bigfoot as being faceless. Then again, there are many, many different cryptids that could potentially be this man without a face. I personally think that this story is most likely true, although I don't think that the man had no face. I think that he most likely had a really bad case of hyperthyroidism. This condition makes your eyes bulge out of your skull and can also cause other facial features to become more prominent. In severe cases, the person may even lose part of their nose and lips due to tissue death. But regardless of what this man's deal was, I think it's pretty clear that he's some sort of cryptid. Do you think this man is human, or do you think he's some sort of animal? Maybe you think he's a mythical creature. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. There are some sounds that when we hear them, they can send shivers down our spines. This is the case of a hiker who in 2017 decided to go through the woods in Oregon. He never imagined that he would come across a terrifying experience that he will never forget. If there's one thing you should know about this state, it's that its forests are huge, very dense, and home to all kinds of animals. When hiking in these parts, you really have to be prepared for anything. But that's what makes it such an exciting place to explore. In the midst of all this natural beauty, something very strange happened to this hiker. In fact, it still gives us goosebumps just thinking about it. The man was recording a video while walking through the woods. We don't know exactly where in the forest he was, but you can tell it was getting late because the light had already started to fade. As he continued on his way, suddenly he heard something very strange. At first, it sounded like someone was laughing nearby, but then the sound started to move closer, and it was definitely getting louder. The man stopped walking and turned around slowly to see if he could find the source of the sound, but he couldn't see anyone. But what was really freaky was that the laughter didn't stop. It kept going around him in circles. You can hear it clearly in the video. At first we thought it was a big group of people running around him, but that's not the case. The source of the sound was too clear, and it seemed to be coming from all directions at once. This went on for a full minute, and then suddenly stopped. And to this day, we have no idea what it was. Some people say it could have been some kind of animal, but which one would laugh like that? It doesn't seem likely. So let's take a look at some of the comments. Many people believe that the man in the video managed to capture the sound of ghosts. Apparently, these types of spirits often appear in forests at dusk. They might be trying to communicate with the living, or maybe they'll be just playing a trick on them. There are also those who believe that the hiker may have stumbled upon a portal to another dimension. If this is true, it would explain why he couldn't see the source of the sound. Whatever it was simply not of this world. Others say it could have been a group of hikers, even though the video shows that the man was alone. So it would make sense that if he had seen them, he would have said something in the video. And yes, the laughter could have been recorded by mistake, but the fact that it lasted more than a minute is quite strange. It seems unlikely that a group of people would hide in the forest and run around laughing, especially if they were doing it to scare this guy. The truth is that whoever or whatever it was, it certainly got its job done. And finally, there are those who say that this is nothing more than a hoax. The sound of laughter was probably added later, and whoever did it did such a good job that even the wind was modified to match the audio. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. There's no doubt that this is a very strange video and that the hiker's reaction is very realistic. The forest was very dark, and it's normal that he couldn't see anything. Whoever or whatever was making those noises was definitely close by. In fact, it seems that it was right behind him when he turned around, but he couldn't see it. Could it have been a ghost? Or some other kind of spirit? Or was it a wild animal? Maybe a bear? Even though it doesn't sound likely, it's possible that he managed to capture the sound of laughter in the trees. We may never know what really happened, but the most important thing is that the man got out of the forest safe and sound. Now, if you want to see something really scary, take a look at this video. We've all heard of haunted houses, but this one takes things to another level. This is the terrifying moment when a group of hikers realized they were about to walk off the edge of a cliff. The vanishing path. For years, hikers have walked along this well-worn trail in Zion National Park, Utah, completely unaware that it would end in disaster. For generations, this path has been used by those looking to take in the beautiful views of the park. But little did they know, it would eventually lead to nothing but air. Hikers began to notice that the trail had become thinner and thinner over the years. But after a heavy rainstorm, they found that the path had vanished completely. In its place was a sheer drop into the abyss below. No one could believe what they were seeing. It looked like the ground had literally dissolved. In the video, we see two hikers approaching the edge of the cliff. They're walking along what appears to be a narrow ledge. It looks like the trail has become very thin due to erosion caused by water runoff. But they continue walking until they realize there's nothing in front of them but a dangerous drop. It's hard to describe just how high up this is, but if you look closely, you can see how small the hikers are in comparison to the vast landscape around them. If they were to fall, there was absolutely no chance of survival. One of the hikers then begins to back away from the edge. He realizes how dangerous this is and wants to get away as fast as possible. But there's no time to waste. As the video goes on, We see another hiker approach the edge. Like the others, he looks out over the drop and realizes he's in grave danger. But he quickly looks back at the trail in an attempt to find a way out of this mess. But there is no escape here. The only way out is the way they came, which is now completely blocked by the fallen rocks and dirt. This means they have no choice but to make the long trek back the way they came. If you're wondering why they don't simply climb over the rocks and dirt, it's because they're too big. These rocks are too large to simply step over. Doing so would also be extremely dangerous. One wrong move and they could easily fall to their death. So they begin the long process of climbing over the rocks. This must have been exhausting after a long hike, but luckily, they all make it out alive. These hikers were very lucky. They managed to escape with their lives despite the dangerous situation they were in. But this serves as a warning to others who might want to take a similar hike. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Back in 2016, a similar incident took place. A group of hikers found that the rock they were standing on had collapsed, leaving them stranded on a narrow ledge with a steep drop on either side. Just like our hikers in this video, these people had no choice but to turn back. There was no way they were going to be able to walk off that narrow ledge. They could have easily lost their footing and fallen to their death. But luckily, all 6 hikers made it out okay. They were stuck on that ledge for hours, but nobody fell or even got injured. These are just 2 examples of many similar incidents that have taken place in national parks across the world. Many hikers fail to prepare for the unexpected and end up in dangerous situations because of it. Always be sure to check the weather forecast before you set out on a hike. If there's been heavy rain recently, it's best to avoid areas that are prone to landslides. And if you do find yourself in a situation like this, stay calm, assess the situation, and plan your next move carefully. It's important to take your time and not make any rash decisions. In most cases, it's best to turn back and try again another day. There's no shame in that. It's better to be safe than sorry. But these hikers were very lucky. They managed to escape with their lives despite the dangerous situation they were in. But this serves as a warning to others who might want to take a similar hike. This is the terrifying moment when a group of hikers realized they were about to walk off the edge of a cliff. The vanishing path. Hikers began to notice that the trail had become thinner and thinner over the years. But after a heavy rainstorm, they found that the path had vanished completely. In its place was a sheer drop into the abyss below. No one could believe what they were seeing. It looked like the ground had literally dissolved. This terrifying camping discovery will make you never enter the woods again. It was 6 in the morning and the campers were awoken by a horrible scene. Their friend's tent was gone. It vanished into thin air. The only thing left behind was a perfect circle of dead grass. The group searched for their friend for hours, but he was nowhere to be found. In 2017, campers in Canada's Banff National Park woke up to a horrifying sight. One of their group's tents was completely gone. What's even more shocking is that there was no sign of a struggle, and the tent vanished without a trace. The campers quickly organized a search party and combed the area for their missing friend. They called out his name, but there was no response. The more they searched, the more worried they became. Where could the tent have gone? And most importantly, where was their friend? The tent in question was a large dome-shaped structure made of waterproof nylon. It's designed to withstand winds of up to 35 miles per hour. So what could have possibly taken it away? The campers soon discovered something that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. Around the tent's former location was a perfect circle of dead grass. It looked like something out of a horror movie. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the search party grew more and more desperate. They checked all the nearby hiking trails, but their friend was nowhere to be seen. The campers began to fear the worst. Had their friend been taken by a wild animal? Or could there be something more sinister at play? Maybe one of the campers decided to take a closer look at the dead circle of grass. It was then that he noticed something strange. It was a slight indentation in the center, as if something heavy had been placed there. Could this be a clue to their friend's disappearance? The campers searched the area thoroughly, but all they found was a small rock. It didn't seem to be anything important, yet they couldn't shake the feeling that they were onto something. Determined to find their friend, the campers contacted the local authorities. A search and rescue team was quickly assembled, but despite their best efforts, there was no sign of the missing man. Days turned into weeks, but still there was no trace of their friend or his tent. What happened to the camper's friend? Was he taken by a wild animal, or did something more sinister occur? The mystery of the disappearing tent still remains unsolved to this day, but there are a few theories. Some believe that the camper's friend may have been taken by a bear. Bears are known to be strong enough to lift heavy objects, and they sometimes target tents when searching for food. However, there were no signs of a struggle, and bears typically don't take their food with them. Another theory is that the camper's friend was taken by wolves. Wolves are known to attack humans, although it's rare. They typically target lone hikers, which in this case is exactly what happened. However, wolves usually drag their victims some distance before eating them. The campers found no bones or other remains, so this theory seems unlikely. There's also the possibility that the camper's friend was taken by a mountain lion. Mountain lions are solitary hunters, and they were known to drag their prey to a secluded area where they can eat it in peace. This could explain why there was no sign of a struggle, and why the campers found no remains. However, the most likely explanation is that the camper's friend simply wandered off and accidentally fell to his death. It's not uncommon for people to get lost while hiking, and sometimes they fall off cliffs or into ravines. This could explain why the tent was found empty and why there was a dead circle of grass around it. When the ground beneath the tent was disturbed, it killed all the grass. The mystery of the disappearing tent may never be solved, but these are just a few possibilities. What do you think happened to the camper's friend? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear another terrifying camping discovery, then check out this video. Till next time, happy camping. In 1819, an English vicar named John was working his sheep farm in the English Lake District when he needed to take a break from the monotony. So he decided to go fishing. He set up his rod and waited patiently for a bite, but what he saw that day made him wish he'd never left his post. John had been alone by the lake for some time when he felt a tug on his line. As he leaned back to get a better angle, he felt another tug, this time stronger than the last. John struggled to reel in whatever was on the other end of the line, but it seemed almost like whatever it was wanted to stay underwater. He could feel the thing thrashing about at the end of his line. But just as he thought he might be able to pull it out, it dove deep beneath the surface and disappeared. Just as John began to think he'd lost his bait, whatever was at the end of his line resurfaced. He grabbed his lure with what he described as a sort of sucker-like mouth and began swimming toward the shore. Startled, John scrambled backward, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, the thing let go of his lure and disappeared under the water again, and that's when he saw it. John had seen enough fish get caught on his lure to know exactly what should have happened next. But this time, instead of a fish, he saw a pale, hairless hand emerge from the lake. The hand reached out of the water with what John described as the tip of a finger pointing toward him. John swore he saw the knuckles of the hand as well as what looked like a pale green watch. John tried to make sense of what he was seeing. At first, he thought perhaps he'd seen a corpse, but that didn't make any sense. There were no boats or people around, and if someone had drowned, their body would eventually float to the surface. What he saw, though, was too quick and too deliberate to be a dead person. As quickly as it had come up, the hand reached back down into the lake and vanished. John stood there dumbfounded, not moving until he heard a splash and saw the head pop back up above the water. His heart raced as he watched the face climb out of the lake. All John could think about was how fast the head emerged from the water. It was as if something were propelling itself out of the lake. And then John saw it, a wide grin stretched across the face, revealing teeth that John described as long and pointed like the teeth of an animal. The being's eyes were large and round and black, staring directly at John. The creature opened its mouth as if to speak, but all that came out was a gurgling sound. Its lips curled into a snarl. Before John could react, the creature dove back into the water and disappeared. To this day, John has never returned to that lake. After seeing what he did, he sold his farm and moved away. Before he left, though, he wrote a letter describing what he had seen to his friend. Reverend, he explained what had happened and told his friend about the strange creature that emerged from the lake. He ended the letter by saying, "I am going to leave this neighborhood as soon as I can, for it is impossible for me to stay any longer in a place where there are such horrible and dreadful things." When his friend received the letter, he wasn't quite sure what to believe. So he visited John to hear more about what he'd experienced. John told him everything he'd witnessed, even showing his friend the spot where he'd seen the creature. But neither man ever saw the creature again. Even so, there are those who believe John's story may not be fiction. Some say the being John saw was a type of humanoid amphibian that lives in the lake. Others claim the creature was the drowned spirit of a miser who once lived in the area and is forever searching for his lost treasure. To this day, people wonder if the creature is still lurking in the lake, waiting for its next victim to stumble upon its watery domain.